So in 1989, I dropped out of school at The Ohio State University and went to work for a small vegetarian restaurant called the King Avenue Coffee House. Now, the King Avenue Coffee House was the kind of restaurant that the media liked to portray as this throwback to the 60s hippies coffee house with patchouli in the air and chamomile tea and unmatched tables and chairs and eclectic art on the walls that was sometimes controversial. Bead store next door, by the way. I went to work there and I fell in love with it. I'm like, oh, I'm home. I stayed there for 8.5 years, and by the time I left, I had decided to open up my own vegan bakery and had become vegan myself. I spent 4 years in the bakery business, 3 of it in a small food co-op called the Clintonville Community Market, and then 1 year in the short north at the North Market. Left there exhausted. Bakery business is a hard business. I went home and slept for 2.5 weeks, got up and started a personal chef and meal delivery service, and I did that for 5 years. 5 years after I started that business, my current business partner, Dr. Pam Popper with Wellness Forum Health, knocks on my door one day and says, I want to buy your business, and I want to move you into our space and build you a kitchen and let you do what you do there. That move, and I said yes, that move opened doors for me that never would have been opened otherwise. I'd probably be still doing bakeries and meal delivery service on my own. But instead, what got to happen was I got to do some things that I fell in love with doing even more. I started teaching cooking classes, and I started doing public speaking, telling people about the health benefits of a plant-based diet. Eventually, I got to write my first cookbook. And I tell you all this because I've had a lot of conversations with people about the vegan diet and about diet itself. And there's some things that happen and conversations that happen when you start talking to people about your diet. One, everyone you talk to becomes an expert in nutrition. Right? You ever notice that? As soon as I'm on a diet, and everyone wants to tell you the right diet to do, right? Well, when you tell them you're vegan, it's the same thing except on crack. The vegan diet's not healthy. You can't live without meat. I swear to God, they have all kinds of, take vitamins, go see your doctor. Or they have a lot of questions. Well, what do you eat? And I say, well, I eat your side dishes, minus the butter and sour cream. And they're like, okay, I kind of get that. And it's like, well, do you eat fish? And I'm like, well, no, I don't eat anything that comes from something that has a mother or a face. And they're, okay. And I'm like, and that includes honey. And they're like, okay. And they kind of get that. And I say, well, did you do it to lose weight? And I have to laugh every time I hear that question because I'm like, well, I kind of bucked the trend there because I went on a vegan diet and gained 200 pounds. And they're like, what? Because everyone assumes that if you're vegan, you're scrawny, that you can't gain weight, and you're eating that rabbit's diet, your carrots and celery, and that's all you eat. I can tell you that's not true. So I tell people I eat the best food on the world. I eat a more eclectic and exciting diet than I've ever eaten. And they're like, oh, okay, and they're a little more curious then, right? And then they always ask this one question. I never cease to get this question wherever I speak. And that is, well, where do you get your protein? Where do you get your protein? And I say, well, I get them from the side dishes that we talked about. There's this myth, this perception that if you eat a vegan diet, that you just can't get enough protein. So I thought tonight what we would do would be to dispel that myth and put it to sleep forever. To do so, we have to go to the experts and find out how much protein humans need. Now, the USDA, the United States Department of Agriculture, is responsible for setting dietary guidelines for Americans, and they tell us that we need to get from 10% to 35% of our calories from protein. A range that's not only maybe confusing, but almost ineffective because are you the 10% or are you the 35%? Now, everybody in the audience that's on a paleo diet is going, I'm 35%, right? But let's look at getting 10% of our calories from protein on a vegan diet and seeing if we can do it. Now, let's assume that we're eating this mythical 2,000 calorie a day diet, right? The gold standard of diets is 2,000 calories a day. So in order for me to get 10% of my calories in protein, then I've got to eat 10%, 200 calories a day in protein. And each gram of protein has 4 calories, so that's 50 grams. And let's assume that I'm going to eat, it's kind of a standard meal, nothing really exciting. I'm going to have beans and rice for dinner, and maybe a side of steamed broccoli. So my cup of cooked beans is 15 grams of protein. A cup of brown rice is 5 grams of protein. And the magical thing about my broccoli is 100 calories worth of broccoli has 11.8 grams of protein. By comparison, 100 calories worth of red meat only has 5 grams of protein. So I've got 15, 5 is 20, and 11.8 is 31 grams of protein in my one meal out of 50. So I've met 60% of my protein needs in one meal. I didn't eat dessert because I don't need it. So I'm 2/3 of the way there. So what does the science say about this protein myth of ours? A really good friend of mine and a researcher who's been studying protein for over 40 years, Dr. T. Colin Campbell, who eventually wrote a book called The China Study that's sold almost 2 million copies now, been out for 10 years. He started studying protein early in his career, back then when we thought that animal protein, that protein, carbs, and fat were the 3 components that we needed to worry about in our diet. All right, and in his early research, he was looking at lab rats, and he was feeding lab rats varying amounts of animal protein. He was using milk in his examples, and then feeding them an aflatoxin that was a cancer-causing agent. And he would vary the amount of the protein. He would feed them 5% and then feed them the aflatoxin, and then he would feed them 20% and feed them the aflatoxin. Well, at 5% protein, regardless of the amount of the aflatoxin, the cancer-causing agent that he fed them, none of the rats got cancer. But at 20% protein, all of them did, and all of them died. So he went on to expand his study when he was asked to go to China and figure out why the Chinese were dying with such varying rates of cancer. It was very geographically determined. So he goes and he does what has become the largest study of human nutrition ever done. And in that study, he finds something, and he finds kind of one of the answers to our question about this protein and protein deficiency in vegans. He finds that cancer rates varied in China based upon the amount of animal protein consumed. All right, so the higher amount of animal protein consumed, the higher the rates of cancer and other diseases. He found that the healthiest people on the planet, the healthiest populations that he observed, got 10% of their calories from protein, and only 10% of that from animal foods. And the Chinese didn't eat dairy because they had lactose intolerance to it. So 10% from protein and 10% from animal foods. All right, so we don't have a protein deficiency whether we're vegan or not. Matter of fact, we consume too much protein, and it's the cause of many of the diseases that we see in Western culture. The World Health Organization tells us that the only people that they see that do not get enough protein are people that do not get enough calories. That's in their World Watch 2000 report. The only people who do not get enough protein are those you have to be going hungry in order to not get enough protein. And then finally, we're seeing this trend, just to drive the point home, of athletes who are adopting a vegan diet. Serena Williams, David Carter, professional football player, Robert Cheek, bodybuilder, Brendan Brazier, triathlete. These elite athletes are all saying they can work out harder, they have better endurance, they're getting stronger, they're faster, they're recovering more quickly, and they have more energy since they've adopted this vegan diet. So it's not the protein that we need to be worried about. Protein isn't our problem. We need more plants in our diet. Most of us don't get enough fiber. We can put an end to a lot of the chronic diseases that we see if we changed our perception about our diet and stop listening to the myths that are out there.